The Heat were in Phoenix on Saturday night, taking on a team with the best record in the NBA, and without Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo, Miami completely dominated the Suns anyway. A 123-100 blowout win led by Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson. We'll break down the game and if Miami has proven that they are in fact an elite title contender. All that and weekly predictions coming up next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Monday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat, however you may be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. We're kicking off a big week here at Locked On Heat. We'll have interviews with two Heat players, Kyle Guy and Mario Chalmers, Heat legend. Mario Chalmers will join the show in the next few days, so make sure to subscribe to the show and get the great content as soon as it's available and published. But it's a great week, so let's kick it off with a great win over the Phoenix Suns. The Heat were without Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and taking on the team that went to the finals last year and had the best record in the league. Miami went with the same starting lineup as they did against Portland last week, with Max Strus getting the nod over Duncan Robinson, something we'll talk about a little bit later in the next segment. So it was Strus, Kyle Lowry, Caleb Martin, Omer Yurtseven still starting in place of Dwayne Dedmon, and PJ Tucker back in the starting lineup. Of course, it took Miami a little time to get into rhythm, but once they did, they were unstoppable. The second quarter was particularly defining, in my opinion. They shot 52% from the field, 7 of 15 from three-point range. They had 38 points to outscore the Suns by 17, and they carried a 21-point lead into halftime. Halftime was a little bit tricky. If you're going to look at this Heat team as they have in the past, you say to yourself, this is a 21-point lead, a great opportunity for the Suns, a very good team, a proven veteran team to mount their comeback. And it looked like they were starting to build a little momentum early in the third quarter, but Miami applied the brakes defensively. They continued to shoot well from the field, continuously outdistancing themselves. They actually had a 26-point lead at one point in the third quarter, so they actually proved to wind up being a little bit better, and again, wound up blowing out the Suns at Phoenix. So a road game without your two best players, and Miami continues to get incredible performances from key players all around. Season highs in performances for Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro. Again, Herro started off a little bit slowly and then continued to carry Miami all the way through, hitting big shots as he is wont to do. A huge game, perhaps, as we've said so many times before, the best game of the season, Wes.
Undoubtedly, right? But a few corrections right off the bat that we're going to start with. Mario Chalmers, Kyle Guy called them current Heat players. They're former Heat players now. Their 10-day contracts expired. Part of the interview is asking them exactly what happens next. So definitely stay tuned to the podcast feeds and get that. And then the last correction here is one from me. I actually think I was too hard on Tyler Herro. After the last few games, I said, prior to the Phoenix game, hey, man, if you want to be in that Luka, Trae Young conversation, you can't be playing like this when the Heat need you. And I actually think I laid it on a little too thick. I think it was too hard. Every superstar in the league, we're seeing Steph Curry go through it right now. They're just going through slumps, and we're recording this before Klay Thompson returns later tonight. But, everybody goes through slumps. Tyler Herro responded to this one with this season high outing against the best team arguably in the league, the team with the best record in the league, no doubt about it. And I thought he paced the Heat in a way that not only it wasn't just points off the bench, right? Like that, there's a difference between points and there's a difference between sort of pacing your team. And I thought Tyler Herro really did that. And yeah, the points are awesome. And my favorite thing about Tyler Herro in this game was the shot selection, right? And Heat coaches took him aside after the Golden State game, the one in San Francisco, where you and I talked about on the recap. What is he doing? He doesn't really look. He looked out of sorts. We didn't really know where he wanted to get to his spots. What was he trying to do? Against Phoenix, he had like a mission. Like he knew exactly what it was that he wanted to be doing on the floor. Early in the game, some of those outside jumpers that he likes, those step backs, the side step jumpers, all the little the mid-range fadeaways, all that stuff, they weren't going in.
No.
I think he missed like 4 of his first 5 shots.
Yeah,
or
1
3
of
his first
5.
4.
1 of 5.
And so after that, what does he do? He starts getting to the basket, layups, dunks, getting steals, getting in transition, creating easier points for himself. And you look at his final shot plot, and he only really made like 2 or 3 shots from outside the paint. Everything was in the paint on a 30-plus point night for him. I love that game. I love the shot selection. I love how he adjusted midstream against one of the best defenses in the NBA. I know they were down a couple guys, but that's still a really complete, good Phoenix Suns team with their 3 best players out there. And probably their five best players out there. I love that game from Tyler Herro. That was the one that we've been waiting to see from him. To me, it was no doubt his best game of the season, and it's one of the ones that he probably leads the highlight reel when we're talking about 6 Man of the Year candidacy. But we could just forget that, put a pin in the 6 Man of the Year. I mean, this guy is legit. It's what we've been saying this entire time. You love to see him break out of the slump in this way.
We should mention that he did avoid suspension. He was likely to not even play this game because after his altercation with Yusuf Nurkic against the Portland Trailblazers, we both theorized that he would be likely suspended. Neither Nurkic or Herro were suspended. And so Herro into the starting lineup, getting a free pass from the league, and he winds up responding with his best game of the season, a season high in 33 points. I mean, just a phenomenal night for him. 12 of 20 overall from the field. 6 free throw attempts. He converts all 6 of them. Just a phenomenal game. But he also sprinkled that in with 5 rebounds. We know what a great rebounder he is. 3 assists. He was making plays for others. And I'm glad you brought up the dunk because that was, look, I don't get generally as excited as I once did of watching basketball because, it's a profession now. But watching Herro break away for a dunk, that fast break opportunity, incredible. He just rises up. We've seen him do that on occasion, but he does it so infrequently. To see that play from him, just a phenomenal game for him. But I think the bigger conversation, we're starting
2 more
to
things
have,
on Tyler before we move on. Just 2 more notes. The dunk, absolutely. You love the strength with which he finished. There was another layup that he had in transition where he just I can't remember which Phoenix Suns defender it was, puts his shoulder into him and just creates a couple more inches for himself closer to the basket and kind of puts up this right-handed floater kind of off the glass. And I'm like, that was more exciting to me than the dunk. Obviously the dunk is louder and is a highlight, but I was like, oh my gosh, a guy at Tyler Herro's size doing that kind of play. You don't really see that anymore in today's NBA, and he is
got alligator arms.
We've heard about the strength that he added, all the muscle, all the
15
doing
pounds.
that so you can take the 15 pounds, everything like that. That's why you do it. Tyler Herro before the 15 pounds doesn't do that. That was huge. And then one other point, that pass to Duncan Robinson at the end of the third quarter, was it for Duncan Robinson's LeBron-esque. Well said. Yes, I was trying to figure. I watched that more than any other Tyler Herro play. His ability, he takes that step into the jab step into the middle, gets the defense moving, comes back out, swings that pass over to Duncan Robinson in the opposite corner. That's a really high-level pass, not just the pass itself that he executed, but to get to that step, to bend the defense, to create that passing window that he got, and to give Duncan Robinson an extra foot or whatever it is that he ended up giving him, and just draining that shot at the end of a shot clock, at the end of the quarter there at the buzzer, to do all of that in that amount of time. We're talking about another that when you want to know the difference between old Tyler Herro and Tyler Herro this season, that's it. Those 2 plays, that layup and then that pass. That's the difference of Tyler Herro this year versus last year.
That pass and then the resulting shot and the fact that Robinson was able to convert it at the end of the third quarter might have been the nail in the coffin. Like that fourth quarter, you saw the Suns try to mount somewhat of a comeback, but by that
got back to within 13 or something. But they were going to. They're a really good team. They were always going to come back a little bit, but I'm glad they never got it back down to single digits.
That's right. And I think this is kind of the hallmark of this team, and I've been saying it all year. This is a team that understands the mission. They understand what's at stake here. They don't give up leads as easily. Look, I know that they've done it on occasion. It's the NBA, the three-point shot, as Eric Spoelstra always says. You can always have a chance to even things up pretty easily. But overall, I think this team understands what's at stake much more easily, much more completely than they have in years past. This isn't a team that loses to bad games as often. I like the way that they understood what was at stake here, and they were able to execute. They understood that Phoenix was going to mount a comeback. They did it. They stopped it short at every opportunity. That third quarter was such a defining, pivotal moment, and to end on such a great note there, it was a fantastic win. But overall, though, if we're ready to move on, I think this win really cements Miami's standing amongst the upper echelon of the NBA elite, because they are now 8-2 against the best teams in the East and Western Conference. They've beaten Chicago twice. They've beaten the Bucks. They've beaten the Nets. They haven't beaten the Warriors, but they've beaten the Suns. And there's another game looming large against the Warriors at home. And who knows, maybe Miami will be able to open it up there. But considering where Miami's in, we've had this conversation before, and the fact that they're without their 2 best players, which is why this is the best team the best win in season history here. I think I think Miami is an elite contender. I think it's a legitimate looking team. I know we made this differentiation recently, but without Jimmy, without Bam, the fact that they were able to beat this team as completely and as evenly as they did, I think Miami is an elite level contender. I don't think they're going to pull the trigger on any major trades. I think that they like their depth, the fact that they're 10 deep at this point, and I think that they have enough to knock over anybody on any given night. And I just think that it continues to be reinforced when they have wins like this. Am I crazy here in thinking this?
I don't think you're crazy. I don't think that's fair, but I still just don't have them at the level of Golden State, Phoenix, Brooklyn, or Milwaukee. I just think that that's a different tier. But that's not to say that Miami isn't a real contender. I think that they are. I think they're a tier with Utah and Chicago. And I'm sorry if I'm forgetting other teams, but in that tier, I think this is a team that can give itself a chance. I just wouldn't put them in that elite tier, to use the word you used. But like I said, to me, it reminds me of like those 2013, 2014 Spurs, even though you can argue those Spurs teams were regular season elite teams as well. I just want to see what it looks like when Jimmy and Bam come back. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Is the depth a strength? Absolutely. Can it remain a strength when Jimmy and Bam come back? I think intuitively you would say, of course. You would have your two best players back on the floor, and your depth should just be more valuable at that point. And it should be actually depth, at that point. But I don't know. I have to see it first. But I think this team is better than I thought it was going to be coming into the season.
We did get an update on Jimmy Butler. He was upgraded to questionable before the game, but he was still ruled out against the Suns. So there's a likely possibility that he'll return on Wednesday when the Heat wrap up this brutal 7-game road trip against the Atlanta Hawks in Atlanta. But we'll talk about some potential matchups later on in the show when we do our weekly predictions, as well as the question mark that I think is looming large here, whether or not Duncan Robinson continues to come off the bench. It's a great question and one that Miami Heat fans will love to have. But you know what else we'd love to have? A steady supply of Built Bars, because if you've got, it's a new year, if you've got New Year resolutions and yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure to include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better because it's soft, easy to chew, 100% covered in chocolate. It's great. You won't miss out on any of the taste, and you get all the nutrients that you might be looking for to help supplement your diet. So many different flavors to choose from. You can get a mixed box with all of your favorites. You can put all of the Built Bars. You can take them with you to work if you want to just power through a lunch, if you want to have a workout in the middle of the day, if you want to go for a walk in between lunch breaks. I know a lot of people do that. You can take a Built Bar with you. It's a great option to just continue to get the energy and nutrients that you need without sacrificing any of the taste. Again, so many great flavors to choose from. And best of all, you go to Built.com right now and use the promo code LOCK15. You get 15% off your order. So use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off, but only at Built.com. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. This is a great opportunity to continue to get all the great content you've been expecting, especially interviews with former Heat players, Kyle Guy and Mario Chalmers. But Mario Chalmers, he's just a permanent Heat player in my standing.
He's a Heat fixture.
He's always got a place in our hearts. But, I was watching that game, and we get the starting lineups announced right before. It's late on a Saturday night. And a lot of anticipation for Heat fans, despite the fact that it was a weekend, et cetera. But it was a big game, obviously, and you expect to see Duncan Robinson back in the starting lineup after missing a significant amount of time due to health and safety protocols. Instead, Max Strus continues to get the starting nod there, and immediately people start theorizing why Duncan's not getting the starting nod. But he looked healthy, so he wasn't like it was any kind of sort of recovery time or easing in process or anything like that. But you start to wonder, is this something that's going to be happening much more regularly? Has Duncan lost his place in the starting lineup moving forward?
I don't know, because you understood why in the previous game when he came back that he wasn't coming off, why he wasn't starting, because he had just landed that day. He was under a minutes restriction. Spoelstra wanted to keep him to 15 minutes. He ends up playing 17 minutes, so right there. And then, my initial thought when the starting lineup came out and Strus was still there, I was like, okay, like maybe just Duncan. Everybody has different effects coming off of COVID, right? And maybe Duncan Robinson was really like, we kind of just say, oh, the guy's in protocols and stuff. And a lot of these players are saying, I had a little cough or whatever it was for a couple of days, right, and then that was it. Maybe Duncan Robinson had a little bit of a more serious bout with it. We don't really know, despite anything he says. But he played 29 minutes against Phoenix.
More than Strus.
It's more than Strus. It wasn't 30 plus, but it wasn't crazy. So I don't think it was a minutes restriction thing, but maybe it was also a situation where hey, he obviously was playing really well. So any effects you were worried about probably weren't there. He went 8 for 16 from 3-point range, 27 points. I mean, he was, again, so probably he's fine. And so
Yeah.
you just play him. And maybe that's something you discover during the game. So I don't know. I don't really know what to make of it, David, I guess, is that maybe Spoelstra was just being safe with Duncan Robinson, figuring, hey, we got a capable shooter in Max Strus to complete our starting five here. Let's continue to be safe with Duncan Robinson and just monitor what he's doing. Turns out he's awesome. Let's ride him down the stretch. And like you said, he ends up playing more minutes than Strus in that game. So, but it's worth at least having the conversation, because I do think that putting Strus in that spot, I don't think it was just playing it safe with Duncan Robinson. I actually do think that Eric Spoelstra and the coaching staff wanted to get a look at it. I think they did.
I'm curious though, because we've had this conversation before, and we're on the opposite end of the spectrum than I think a lot of Heat fans, in that
Yeah.
we don't see anything other than shooting that Max Strus does particularly well. And yet there's this interpretation from a lot of fans that he's more athletic, that he's a much better dunker, that he's a much better defender, which is completely and objectively not true. And I just don't know what he does better and why he would get the nod over. And the only thing I can come back to is that Strus has been on an incredible hot streak, Robinson on the other end of that spectrum. So if you're going with a hot hand and you say, you know what, Strus and Robinson are almost interchangeable, why not go with a guy who's been shooting well of late and bring Duncan in, kind of see where he's going? To your point, I think you kind of get a feel whether or not he's got his touch going as coming off the bench, and then maybe you let him play a little bit more often. But at this point, I can't think of anything else. In fact,
Right.
I think you have some numbers to back up the fact that both Strus and Robinson are pretty identical players, really.
Yeah, there's this idea that Strus has been is completely outplaying Duncan Robinson stuff, but yeah, I mean, you look at the numbers. This is just the last 10 games, and really you start seeing Max Strus hit this hot streak, and also Duncan Robinson, and this is including the 8 for 16 night on Saturday night. But Duncan Robinson's been playing well offensively. So here's the Miami Heat stats with Max Strus on the floor, no Duncan Robinson. Okay, so Strus in place of Robinson. The Heat are shooting 42.9% from three-point range. Remember that number, 42.9% from three-point range on 15.23 three-point attempts per game. The Heat overall are outscoring opponents by 6.7 points in those minutes that Strus is in the game. No Duncan Robinson. Also over those last 10 games, Duncan Robinson on the floor, no Max Strus, okay? The Heat are shooting 42.9% on three, the exact same percentage. Not 43%, not 42.8, 42.9% on 13 three-point attempts per game. The Heat are outscoring opponents by 5.9 points in those minutes. Duncan Robinson playing those minutes where Duncan Robinson's on the floor without Max Strus and vice versa, slightly less with Duncan Robinson, slightly more with Max Strus, and no Duncan Robinson. So when you're talking about the 15.23, the three-point attempts are basically equal. The plus minus is basically equal when you consider the size of the sample. What I'm saying, David, is they're completely interchangeable when you look at how they impact the Miami Heat on the court. The only reason I can think of why because of that, the only reason I can think of why Spo would maybe want to get a look at Strus is simply because we know there's a higher level for Duncan Robinson to get to. We've seen it. We saw it against Phoenix. That's the level that we're accustomed to seeing Duncan Robinson play at. We don't know if there's a higher level to see if there is for Max Strus. One way to find out is to put him in the starting lineup, right? Let's see how good this guy really is. And he is playing with a kind of confidence that Duncan Robinson isn't. And I think that much is fair to say. And maybe, hey, Strus, he's playing with a lot of swagger, a lot of confidence. He can handle in a promotion to the starting lineup. I don't think he's going to be afraid of something like that. And for Duncan Robinson, you've been trying to figure out a way to create that confidence again. And I don't even know with good three-point shooting games if that confidence is 100% back to what it was prior to him signing the 3-year contract that he signed this summer. And maybe one way is, hey, you know what? Just take all the pressure off completely. Come off the bench, man. You and Tyler Herro just run other bench units off the floor. And maybe that's something that contributed to him and the night he had against Phoenix was coming off the bench. Maybe. It's hard. It's impossible to know. So I don't know. Maybe it's more of an emotional experiment on Spo's part.
That's fair. And I think he got it. I think we saw from the post-game press reaction that Duncan not entirely, like what he said publicly, what he said openly, pretty clearly still supports the decision, right? He's not going to challenge. He's not going to make any waves or anything like that. He understands my role is the same and it feels the same when I'm out there, etc. But to me, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't think that's the case. I think he was a little miffed about the decision. I think he was a little chippy about it, and I think it kind of
agree.
lit a fire there. Look,
I agree.
within seconds he comes into the game, he takes a charge. He looks a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more moving intentionally, to use a phrase that Eric Spoelstra likes to use a lot. And I think it lit a fire under Duncan's ass in a way that we haven't seen all season. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the start of a really hot streak for Duncan over the next 5 to 10 games, because I think this really has kind of cemented his idea that, you know what, I have to remind myself, or I needed this reminder, as painful as it might be, that I am an NBA player, that I am worthy of the big contract, etc., and that I'm also worthy of the starting job. To hell with Max Strus. He's a fine player. He's a nice guy, whatever, but let him come off the bench. This is my spot. This is my money.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue to go earn it. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see the very best of Duncan this season moving forward.
I'm with you. I think the exact phrase you're using, lit a fire under Duncan Robinson. This is a guy who's accustomed to playing the underdog.
Yep.
And after signing a 3-year contract that's paying him $15+ million a year,
yeah,
you're not really an underdog anymore. And I think that
buddy.
might have it changed Duncan Robinson. I don't know. It changed him in some way. It fundamentally changed him.
Right.
And I think maybe that contributed to something that we've seen this season. Putting him on the bench for a guy in Max Strus who you didn't even think was going to be in part of the rotation coming into this season, and now he's got your starting job. I think the fact that Duncan Robinson was, I read it the same way you read it, David. I thought he was a little like, you know what, I'll play my role. But he didn't seem super happy about doing that. He wasn't stoked about going to the bench. And I think that's exactly what Eric Spoelstra was hoping for. I don't think Eric Spoelstra sees those comments. He's like, oh man, did I hurt Duncan Robinson's feelings? I think Eric Spoelstra is saying like, damn straight I hurt Duncan Robinson's feelings. Good. And I think that's exactly what the intent was. And obviously, impossible to know whether or not Duncan Robinson had that 8 for 16 night in the pocket, regardless if he was coming off the bench or starting that night. It's impossible to know. But all we have is the results that we have, David. And it worked. It worked. And the lineup does work with Max Strus in it. You don't really see a drop-off as far as the three-point shooting or anything else. Defensively, Duncan Robinson, I think, is still slightly better than Max Strus, especially when we're talking about you're getting switched and maybe you end up in the post. We've actually seen Duncan Robinson make quite a few good post-defensive plays this season, swiping or blocking and things like that. That's not something Strus is really doing. But I don't think the drop-off is such that you really need to worry about it. I don't think either of them are as a plus defender. You're just, all right, we got a minus defender in the starting lineup regardless if it's Duncan Robinson or Max Strus. So, and I guess we just figure it out. I think this is something worth monitoring. I think it's something worth monitoring. I don't know. I think you're right. I think it results in Duncan Robinson maybe taking a little bit of a leap here. Whether it continues to come off the bench or part of the starting lineup is something we'll have to watch and see.
Yeah, fuck your imposter syndrome. Anyway, let's move on. We're going to get some predictions from Nostradumbwes in the next segment. But first, just a reminder that Bet Online would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. Bet Online remains the #1 spot for all your best sports wagering action for 2022. New year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to get started, from football, basketball, hockey to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager in all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And don't forget to use that promo code LOCKEDON.
All right, it is time to look into the future and make some predictions for the Miami Heat this week. It is time for Nostradumbwes. We took last week off because it was just a weird schedule with a bunch of games. We just never really got to it. So no review of last week's predictions.
I have a theory.
I was right about everything.
I have a theory. I think Nostradumbwes, you needed a little time to recharge. New year, when you have to tap into the mysteries of the cosmos, even Nostradumbwes needs a little time off, and I think that's what it was.
Yeah, rest management, load management.
Sure.
There's a little load management for Nostradumbwes.
The maintenance program.
So let's start with Wednesday's game at Atlanta. Man, it's a 3-day break for the Miami Heat. Their longest break, I believe, of the season. And an earned one.
Avoid COVID while you're there. Avoid Omicron, please.
That's right. They're flying into Atlanta. They're going to stay in Atlanta for a while, and this is their final game of the road trip. But it's Atlanta. It's close enough. I think they're going to start feeling like they're a little bit closer to home because they obviously are much closer to home. And so we just got done talking about it, David. My prediction for Wednesday's game in Atlanta is that Max Strus will start in place of Duncan Robinson. I think that Spoelstra, he's gotten a look at it for 2 games. sort of one of those games. Duncan Robinson load management, minutes restriction because of him coming off of protocols. That last game in Phoenix, as well as Duncan Robinson has played, I think all Heat fans, everybody, Duncan Robinson, they probably all expect for Duncan Robinson to start. I think Spo wants to get another look at it. With Strus starting, Duncan Robinson coming off the bench. Would not shock me if they just end the road trip this way with Max Strus starting in place of Duncan Robinson.
I agree. I really do think that that's a likely scenario. I think you've got something rolling now. Whether Jimmy is back in the starting lineup or not, I think it works to have Strus out there and to kind of, again, continue to light that fire there. I know a lot of Heat fans probably want to ask this question, Nostradumbwes here, but maybe you have a prediction to offer. Is this kind of set the table for a trade down the road? Because I don't think it does, but I wonder if you think it might be an opportunity to see, you know what, we're just as good as you proved with the numbers in the previous segment. You're just as good with Max out there. Why not get something in return for a $15 million a year player in Duncan Robinson?
Because of all the numbers that I did not include in that little stat breakdown, because that wasn't really the point, was the numbers with Max Strus and Duncan Robinson on the floor are even better than all of that. If you want to be a three-point shooting team in today's NBA, you need to have more than just one three-point shooter. And you look at
Yeah, that's
Strus
right.
and Duncan Robinson. And here's the other thing about Duncan Robinson versus Strus. And I don't want to do the whole thing again, but Duncan Robinson is a proven three-point shooter. Max Strus was not considered a three-point shooter. He was a career 36% three-point shooter coming into the season. That's not in college. He was not a three-point specialist. Like, it wasn't like this wasn't really his game. And in summer league, we started to think of him in that way. And I think because he's white, people are like, oh yeah, three-point shooter. No, that wasn't really his game. This is more of a new development for Strus. Not saying it's not right. I think the work that he's done with the coaching staff and with Rob Fodor and all these guys has been really good. And I think this is sustainable for him. But I think it's just better to have multiple three-point shooters. And I think that he will give. The other thing about Duncan Robinson is I know people complain about the contract, but Heat fans complaining about the Duncan Robinson contract. I know you want every player to play to a certain level commensurate with the salary that they're making. Whatever, man. That's your you problem. It seems like an insecurity that comes from your whole deal in life. You deal with that. What I will say, don't complain about Duncan Robinson's salary. That is the only tradable contract on the Miami Heat right now. You want to trade Max Strus or Caleb Martin? Have fun. Figure what player do you want making $2 million right now that's better than Strus or Riley? Like, it just doesn't work that way. You need to be able to match salary in trades in the NBA. And you've got basically Duncan Robinson and PJ Tucker's $7-8 million contract. Like, that's not really movable. Duncan Robinson making between $15 and $17 million over the next 3 years. That's movable. That can be the piece you need to go and add other things to it and get an upgrade on this roster wherever it might be. Not saying the Heat signed him for that reason, but they thought about it because they're a good front office and they think about things and they say, hey, we need a middle class kind of salary here, and that in regards to the NBA is a middle class kind of salary. So stop complaining about that. If you ever want the Heat to make a trade in the next 3 years, you better be loving that Duncan Robinson salary, not making fun of it. Let's move on. Friday versus Atlanta, the second part of the doubleheader there. Back at home at FTX Arena, finally. I think Jimmy Butler. Well, it sounds like Jimmy Butler is on track to play. You mentioned he was listed as questionable. Did not play against Phoenix, but it's trending in that direction that he'll be back. He'll be back by Wednesday in Atlanta, and I think you and I expect him to be. And it sounds based on Eric Spoelstra's comments. That's what it sounds like. So, last game of the road trip, first game back from this right ankle sprain. I think Jimmy Butler against Atlanta, in Atlanta, it's a fine Jimmy Butler game. But I think he needs just to get his wind a little bit, kind of get back into conditioning. Friday versus Atlanta at home, I think we see full-blown top 5 player in the NBA type of Jimmy Butler. And when I say that, that's the level he was playing at before all these injuries started piling up. Atlanta does not turn the ball over a lot. Mm-hmm. They're not a great team, but one thing they do is they don't create a lot of fast break opportunities, scoring and transition opportunities for opponents. So I think it's going to be a half-court game for the Heat, for both teams, for the Heat. Yeah. And who thrives for Miami in the half court? Jimmy Butler. Who has a bunch of small guards that Jimmy Butler is going to get switches on and feast on? The Atlanta Hawks. I could see this being a 30-plus point game for Jimmy Butler Friday versus Atlanta at home.
Nice. No, I'm in complete agreement with you. I like that. I like that. We've seen this before. Like, Jimmy comes back from injury, he's energized. He's like, you know what? I miss being out here. I miss dominating. I miss taking over games. And Atlanta is a great opportunity for him to do so. So, especially buoyed by the energy of that FTX crowd that hasn't seen this team since mid-December. It feels like an eternity.
Since last year. We haven't seen him this year.
Yeah, I know it's been tough. I think it's going to be a huge game for him. So I like where you're going with that, and I'm looking forward to seeing that triple double, or perhaps. Oh, I'm sorry, I kind of added that in there, but you know what? Let's go
It's
with it.
your
A triple
prediction.
double. Jimmy Butler triple double. Why not?
Nostradamus.
Dave, what?
We
Something
tried
like
to
that.
do this. We did this earlier in the year. I forgot what it was. All right, final prediction Saturday against Philadelphia again at home. Joel Embiid probably playing in that game. We really never know with Joel Embiid, but he's been healthy lately. Knock on wood for my fantasy team, but I think we see a Joel Embiid triple double here because unlikely that Bam Adebayo returns by then.
Yeah,
And it's not impossible for it to happen. The Heat of, as the Heat do, they're very quiet about these injuries, but I feel like, Bam's going to take a little bit more time to get his conditioning and everything back. And I would be surprised if they were like, all right, welcome back, Bam Adebayo, go defend Joel Embiid for 30 minutes. Like, good luck with
yeah,
that coming off this injury.
yeah.
That seems just, mean, even at the NBA level. I think, so my prediction for this game is not that Joel Embiid has a triple double, even though I think he probably does. It's that Omer Yurtseven's reign is over as of Friday.
Oh,
It's been a good story. It's been awesome. I
yeah,
think Omer Yurtseven, you and I were talking before the starting recording here, and I legitimately don't know who's better, him or Dwayne Dedman. I really don't anymore. And I think a week ago we had this conversation. I was like, I still think Dwayne Dedman is better. And I still think
yeah,
Dwayne Dedman is the guy who gets the minutes in the playoffs just because of the experience. But in the regular season, I don't know who was better. Omer Yurtseven's been really good for Miami, and I don't know that it's empty calories. I really don't, despite, obviously getting much more minutes. I mean, he is doing things he has progressed on both ends of the floor in a way that's meaningful, in a way that you can really measure, not just with
yeah,
statistics. And I know people love to talk about rebounds. You know my opinion on rebounds. I don't care. It's a loser stat. But
yeah.
everything else about his game, I love what you've seen from a developmental standpoint. But when Joel Embiid's on the other side, I don't know about it. That's all I'm saying. And maybe when Dwayne Dedman comes back, because it looks like he's coming back too relatively
Right.
soon. He's probably back by that Philadelphia game. Does he get to start in place of Omer Yurtseven? Again, I don't know. There's a really good argument to be said that, hey, just keep starting Yurtseven. He seems to be doing well with it. And Dwayne Dedman is used to playing your backup center minutes. So just keep
Hmm.
him in that spot.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what they end up doing. Regardless if whether or not Dwayne Dedman returns and starts or if Yurtseven starts, it's still Joel Embiid on the other side. That's a tough matchup. You love everything you've seen from Yurtseven. It's totally been Yurt's season, but Yurt's season might be over here.
At least one of those players has to foul out, right? That's the
Yes.
reality going up against Embiid. If not both of them somehow. I saw you could see a lot of Tucker at center minutes as well. I could see the Heat going small. You know what? It's just an interesting development there to see Yurt Seven continue to grow. His numbers against the Suns were not great from a scoring perspective. He just didn't have the touch shooting wise. But he did have some nice passing numbers. Finished with 8
He did.
assists too, showing some nice touch. And being able to recognize cutters and working the dribble handoffs and things of that sort. So the
This
nice
is
numbers
such a
for
good
him.
Can I just zoom out one more time before we close up here?
Yes.
Um, this is such a good passing team, and I think that's
Oh
something that
boy.
gets lost in this conversation of, oh my God, look at what the bench guys are doing, so much
Right.
depth. Look at the 3-point shooting. That 3-point shooting is created by this team's passing, and you're right.
Yeah.
Yurtseven, look, he's not Jokic out there. It's not like 8 Jokic assists. It was 8, some dribble handoffs and stuff like that. But he's also finding cutters. To your point, that
Yeah.
pass that Kyle Lowry made to Tyler Herro on that give and go was just a phenomenal pass, and that's Kyle Lowry. Like that's why he is Kyle
Yeah.
Lowry, but this
Yeah.
team, we talked about the Tyler Hero pass earlier. You're seeing really good moments from guys like Strus and Duncan Robinson in the passing game lately. Like, this is a really, really high level passing team. And when you get Jimmy and Bam back, who are among the best passers at their positions in the league, and
Absolutely.
in Bam's case, probably second best passer in the league at his position, um, it's only going to get better. It's
Yeah.
only going to get better. It's just something. If you're a Heat fan, you're watching this team. Just pay attention to the passing. Give it a moment. Really appreciate it. That's why all this 3-point shooting is happening. It's not just 5 shooters around the arc, pass the ball, swinging around. There's a lot of stuff happening. Off ball movement, cuts, driving and kicking. Just give it a minute and appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, that does it perfectly. I think that does it for this show as well. Great win over the Phoenix Suns for this Miami Heat team that continues to impress and improve. We'll see what happens when they start to incorporate Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo eventually back into the lineup. Maybe they'll do so on Wednesday against the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll have that recap. But in the meantime, make sure to stay tuned for our interviews with Kyle Guy and Mario Chalmers. You won't want to miss those. But that'll do it for today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember that every episode is always free and available wherever you get the show. So make sure to subscribe if you want to hear from Mario Chalmers and Kyle Guy. Make sure to also check out Locked On Bets. Make them your second listen of the day. They've got all your information needs regarding any kind of gambling situation or anything like that. But that'll do it for us today. I am David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Happy.